calculations right, since I was born just under a year later, that means you were pregnant within 3 months.
Right.
Well, I was working at night down on the river for the turnover.
Yeah.
And I'd go in at 2 in the afternoon and get off about 4 the next. No.
3 or 4. You get home about 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, I'd go in at about 5 or 6, something like that.
Sometime during the day.
2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and come home. And most of the time she'd still be up waiting for me.
I couldn't sleep.
And
I never slept by myself.
she'd never been by herself before.
So I couldn't
And
sleep.
so when I come in from work, she was sitting there waiting. And of course we had our own little place then, so that's probably where you was conceived.
I'm sure. This in this same little apartment that was behind the other house, up the stairs. And where was that at in Vicksburg? Do you have any recollection?
Yeah, it was downtown Vicksburg, close to the old courthouse museum, if you know where that's at.
It was on a high hill, I remember that.
It all started in Hattiesburg in 1956 on October 6th when Mom and Dad got married. They then moved to Vicksburg. I was born in Vicksburg October 2nd of the following year. I was just 2 weeks old when we packed up everything and moved to Dallas, where we stayed until 1963. Linda was born that year on June 14th. Dad tried to find a job in Hattiesburg but was unsuccessful, so we moved after a short period to Natchez. We lived in Natchez only briefly, just a matter of months, before we moved back to Hattiesburg. After we got back to Hattiesburg, Dad found a job in New Orleans, so we packed up again and moved everything to New Orleans, where we stayed until 1965. Kim was born in New Orleans on July 8th of 1964. In 1965, Dad moved the family to Jackson to be closer to his mom, who was very sick. We lived in Jackson until 1968. Paul was born in Jackson on May 29th of 1967. In 1968, we moved from Jackson back to Hattiesburg for good.
So y'all lived there until you
Come back to Hattiesburg.
picked up and
No,
left for Dallas?
No,
Or
to
no?
Hattiesburg.
Oh, y'all come back?
to Hattiesburg, and
Well, wait a minute.
I had
one
been
more.
laying brick with Rudy's son, but right after I felt like I could go back to work, I left with a turnover. And then I went to come back home to lay brick. So I was served apprenticeship back then. You served 4 years, before you could draw journeyman's wages. I was drawing journeyman's wages after about 2 years.
Well, Buddy says he don't remember
Because
it.
all my people were bricklayers, and it was part of the family,
He says he don't remember this happening or anything about it, but when we left Vicksburg, his car wasn't running. And I think he had to sell it or something to get rid of it. And his friend, Robert Earl Bryant, from here in Hattiesburg, come got us in his car and brought us back to Hattiesburg. And then we moved from Hattiesburg to Natchez.
Well, I sure don't remember
And-
that.
Yes, well, we did. And then we moved to Natchez.
Now, you get
Listen,
way ahead
let
of
me
yourself.
tell the rest of this, and then you can say what you want to say. But that's where he bought me my first little set of rings. It was a little 2-piece white gold set of rings with a little solitaire and 2 little diamonds on each side of it, and a little solid band.
Yeah,
for
we borrowed
$49.
Mama's wedding rings to
My first little set of
Get
wedding
married.
rings was bought in Natchez. And
And I paid $50 for them. That was all
yeah,
we could
about
afford at the
$50
time.
plus the tax, but they were $49.
Had one little
just bought
diamond in it, I think.
3. I think it had
And
3
it was so
little
little you
diamonds.
couldn't hardly see it.
But I was just as happy with them rings if you had paid, $1,000 for them.
So
Anyway, we
y'all
had
had
come
gone
home.
from Vicksburg back to Hattiesburg over to Natchez, and then you had to wind up back in Vicksburg again before we left for Dallas.
Well, let me tell you this before
Oh.
we get to that part of it. When we come back to Hattiesburg, Aunt Lil and Uncle Coy invited us all over for dinner, for supper that night. And of course, your mother was leery anyway about, eating in front of people and stuff like that. But anyway, we all loaded up our plates and was sitting there getting ready to eat, or eating. And Uncle Coy said, Lillian. She said, what? I said, this is some of the best possum you've ever cooked. And your mama like to had a fit. I thought you were going to die.
Well, Mother used to cook
Of course, course it was roast is what it was. She didn't know what it was.
But not knowing how to be picked at back in the days, you know, his.
Yeah, she thought, and she still does.
And
She
I
takes
take it
everything
for
as
fact.
God's word. You know, everything that I say is the gospel. It's truth. And it's been that way for 50 years, you know. And I'm always joking and kidding around and playing and all that stuff. And she's very, very serious. And I could make some kind of crack. And boy, she just tears roll down her cheeks, you know.
So, let's go back to the circle.
We come back
All right.
to Natchez, and then from Natchez back to Hattiesburg, and that's where Bob McLean come got us to Dallas, Texas.
No,
No,
he come to get us in Vicksburg.
no, we never did come back to Hattiesburg.
I went to work. I couldn't find work here in Hattiesburg. I worked for a few days here.
I guess we were
And
back
it got
in
to the
Vicksburg.
point where there
Yeah,
just
we
wasn't
were.
much building going on in Hattiesburg very much.
We were back with Doris when Bob come got us.
So when I went to Natchez, that's when my mother met Barney Fuller. And I went to work for a masonry contractor over there called, I keep thinking of his name now. I had it on the end of my tongue a while ago. Anyway, I worked with Uncle Pat.
And Jim.
And then I went to work with this guy, and he was building an addition onto a huge motel in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. That's where I run into. They were filming the movie Band of Angels
Clark
there. That's
Gable
where I
and
saw
Yvonne
Clark Gable
DiCarlo.
and Yvonne DiCarlo and all that bunch. They'd come in every morning before they started shooting and eat breakfast, and we'd be in there eating breakfast too.
I didn't get to see
But
him.
anyway, we went back to Natchez, and
But
we worked around there for a while, and then I went on over to Vicksburg and went to work with Rudy again.
We was with Doris when Bob come got us from Dallas, Texas.
No.
We were with Doris, buddy.
I know that, Ned, but listen, before that, when I got back to Vicksburg, wasn't much laying bricks, so I went to work then at a Westinghouse plant out on 61 in Vicksburg.
Oh, yeah, I barely remember.
And I went to work at Westinghouse, and then it got to the point where Westinghouse was starting to lay off. They were, getting tight. This was probably about
57.
57, somewhere around in there.
Because Glenn was born.
And you was 7 days old when you were
days
about
old.
3 days old when I knew I had to have a job. I had a baby and I had no way of getting a job, so I took off. I had a little 49 Mercury, yellow, and I took off and went to Dallas. I'd called Tommy first, and Tommy told me, "Man, there's plenty of work over here. You can find something." And I said, "Well, I got a new baby, and I can't, I got to go to work." So he said, "Come on, I'll be on the lookout for him." He gave me his telephone number. He said, "You come on straight down Highway 80. Back then, that was before interstates and stuff like that. And then when you get to the edge of Dallas, you stop and call me." So I did, and he said, "Go on through Mesquite, and pull over to the service station or something, let me know where you're at, and I'll come get you." So that's what I did, and then you was about 3 days old, 2 or 3 days old when I left to go to Dallas.
6 days old.
And then Bob had a brand new 55 Oldsmobile, red and white. Beautiful car.
New, nice car.
And Bob and Tommy and myself come back to get nailed. And you was 7 days old.
6 days old.
6 days.
6 days old.
Well, about 6 days old when we come back to get you. In the meantime, I had found a job at Cook Machinery in Dallas. And the weather was beginning to kind of get cool. And so I went ahead and got a job on the inside instead of trying to lay brick. And so I worked at Cook Machinery 2 or 3 times after that because
What'd you
I
do?
go in the summertime I go out and lay brick because there's more money in it. And then in the wintertime when the weather got bad, I'd go back to Cook Machinery and work there until the spring.
What was you
of the
doing
year.
at Cook Machinery?
Building these big commercial dryers and
Washer dryer.
washer dryers, you know, like clothes dryers.
So
Yeah,
it was assembly
huge
work?
ones, you don't stand up 6 foot off the floor.
Yeah, so was it assembly work? You were working on a assembly line?
Yeah, I started out wiring these things. They had a pattern that you went by, and they taught me how to wire them and stuff like that. And then after that, they were all run off of butane too, or gas, natural gas. And so after I wired for a while, then they put me to inspecting the machines as it come through, and I'd have to hook up a gas line to it and then fire it off and see that everything was all right. And then I'd put my name on it, inspected by it.
All right,
That-
but you need to tell about the time you got in a fight with the boy and got laid off right before Christmas. That's when
Yeah.
Bob and Maggie had to jump in and bail us out.
No, but it wasn't that time. But
Yes, it was. You didn't have a
there was
job.
no boy there.
And
You've
they
seen
took up
people
a
that were
collection
so
for you,
ticklish that
if
you
you
could just point your finger at them and then they'd jump. Have you ever seen people like that? I didn't know that this old boy was that way. And we had been off, stopped for lunch, and I had a metal lunchbox, and all of us did. And we was fixing to go back to work. The whistle was blowing, we was fixing to go back to work, and I done something like this and something, and boy, that old boy he was all over me. And he hit me in the mouth with his lunchbox. And,
Pinched him is what it was on the button. He didn't like that.
yeah, done something, I was picking at him something.
He
But
didn't
anyway,
like
he-
that at all.
Anyway, he broke a tooth off there. And they suspended me for
3 weeks.
a week,
Right before Christmas.
about 3 weeks, yeah. And but during that 3 weeks, they sent me to the dentist to get that tooth fixed. And you know, for a long time, I had a tooth there that was had a little gold around it, you know, in my younger days. And that's where they had to put me back together, so to speak.
Well, something real important about
But,
that now, but the group of men that Buddy worked for took up a
Getting
collection
close to Christmas.
for us that amounted to $35. But back then, $35 was like a pot of gold. And we took that and bought a week's supply of groceries and your Christmas with it. And you had 2 or 3 nice little toys, a big old tall clown, a little red wagon, and something else, some little army trucks or something. And that was your second Christmas. So you had our first Christmas, second
No,
Christmas.
it was second Christmas. He's
Second
too young to
Christmas,
know
yeah,
anything
second
about
Christmas.
his baby.
So you had plenty Christmas, and then Maggie and Bob bought groceries for us for a couple of weeks and paid our month's rent that month.
They would-
And,
What had happened, Natalie told Bob that every Friday when he'd get paid, he'd come by our house and, well, you need anything? I'd say, no, I don't get it. He'd say, well, I think you do. So anyway, he'd let me have about $30 every week to pay my rent and buy a few groceries and whatnot.
well, they bought our
And then-
groceries for that 3 weeks, and they paid
Yeah.
our rent for that month.
And then
Which, you
after
know,
that,
How many people in the world would do that for you?
well, after that, Bob was working daytime out close to Love Field in Dallas, and after he got off there, sometimes he'd work at the service station out there on Auburnsburg Lane, I think. And he said, well, he told me, said, I can get you a job out there if you can handle 2 jobs right now. I said, man, I can handle 2 jobs. So anyway, he got me on at the service station, and I'd work, you know, till about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and come home, change clothes. And then Bob come by and pick me up, we'd go to the service station, and work till about 12 at night. And then I'd come home and go to bed and get up the next morning and go to work. So that's how that first year was just chaos.
And one other thing about during that time, he also worked at a shoe store for about a year or
That
a
was
while.
after that. That was after.
But it might have been after, but anyway, he worked in this shoe store, and I had more shoes then than I ever had in my life. But he bought me everything. Every week he'd buy me a pair of shoes. And the first ones was a little pair of squaw boots, little Indian squaw boots, and I loved them little of shoes. You know, just made like leather, and then he bought me some high-heeled shoes. And I had more shoes than I ever had in my life, but that's all we could afford was maybe a pair of shoes a week, you know. But while he was working there, he did that. And one thing I loved about living in Dallas so much was, you know, shopping downtown and all. And I even went to work in Tych's department store downtown, Main or Commerce Street. I'm not sure which street it was on.
Commerce Street.
But Neiman Marcus was right down the street from it, and that's where I caught the bus to go to work while I was working. Well, not to Tych's, but I worked at also the Gold Bond Stamp Store on it was 1600 Oak Lawn Avenue in Dallas, Texas. And I worked there, and I would catch the bus in front of Neiman Marcus and go out to the stamp store and then get off back there. But when I worked in Tych's, I just loved it. It was a 2 or 3 story, you know, store that had,
Huge.
you know, I don't know if it was stairs or escalators back then, but they had an elevator in there too. I remember that. But I loved being in that store, and they had what they had called a bargain basement down at the bottom. And back then, they first come out with these little old shift dresses, little. They come in every color, solid black, green, blue, and every color. And I went down there every day figuring out which one of them little dresses I was going to buy next if I could afford them, you know. And then they had what they called just a blouse bar in Tych's, you know. And I couldn't ever afford any of them, but I just loved going by there and looking at all those different kind of pretty blouses, you know. And
we lived in East Dallas right off of Grand Avenue on Berry Avenue, and I told you that, you know, you've seen pictures of your mother when she was young. But your mother was some kind of good-looking woman. Boy, she was a good-looking woman.
Oh, I've seen the
talking
picture.
about when we would go to Grand Avenue or get on Grand Avenue, go shopping or something like that, we'd go to Penny's or somewhere like that. And I never will forget one time I bought her a little shirtwaist dress that was kind of a tangerine color.
it was a little spaghetti strap,
Yeah.
sundress. Peach.
Sundress, but
Peach or tangerine,
walk down the street and everybody turned their eyes, look at my wife.
yeah. You had to,
I got her, you ain't.
you had to wear the little strapless bra.
She
with it,
mine.
you know.
Don't touch her.
And one of Nita's boyfriend, Nita lived with us for a while, and then she married this guy, David Calvin. But anyway, he had only saw me in my everyday clothes, like I got on now, or something everyday clothes, and so I had that little dress on, was all dressed up, and went where he worked one night. It was a waffle shop. And he said, "Boy, she looks like a different woman altogether." And then one time, I used to love navy blue little shirt dresses, just anything navy blue I used to love it. Navy blue stockings, and then the black patent leather high heels. And I was walking downtown Dallas one time, and he used to have shoulder length, real dark hair, and now it's gray. But I was walking along one time, and this couple passed by me, and the guy turned around and said, "Well, she looks like Elizabeth Taylor," and Magley, but Papa's and my friend, Bob's wife, she used to say I looked like her too. Of course, I've got brown eyes, and Elizabeth Taylor had them violet eyes, But I used to be a lot slimmer and everything back in them days.
So how long were you in Dallas before we moved in the house where Miss Birmingham was our landlord?
Oh, we had come back to Hattiesburg once or twice and tried to make it around here. It just wasn't enough work to keep me busy.
Glenn was 15 months old when we came back to
We
Hattiesburg.
came back to Hattiesburg for a while.
And that's the first time.
And then we worked around here for a while, and I was working sometimes 3, maybe 4 days a week because there wasn't that much construction going on for Berkeley. And so I called Tommy and Bob, and Tommy come back too. Tommy and Betty, they come back too, and he had 4 kids, and of course I just had you. And,
Well, while
at
we
that
were,
time, I come back, and me and Tommy did come back for a while and got a job and everything, and then the weekend, Bob had a little old 50 model Studebaker. And he loaned us that Studebaker to go back to Mississippi or back to Hattiesburg and get all our belongings and try to get back to Dallas.
well, let me tell this real quick, Lou. When we first came back to Hattiesburg, you were 15 months old, and that's the first time your grandmother Smith had seen her first grandbaby. You were her first grandbaby, and she cried. She was happy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. But
Go
anyway,
ahead.
we all loaded up. Tom Trey had a little old trailer. Put a trailer hitch on the back of that little Studebaker. Back then, the engines in the Studebaker was about like a 4-cylinder flathead engine in it. Wasn't very powerful at all. And we had that trailer loaded up from one end to the other. And then we had clothes and stuff like that packed in the back seat.
Betty had quilts laying all across the back
Quilts
seat,
laying
and
everywhere.
kids and 4 boys.
So we put them
Or 3
four
boys and
kids,
a little
3
girl.
boys and a girl, a Betty and
Slept back there, and
We put
you
them
sat in
back
my
there.
lap up front with 4 adults. Lord, no, I think he was back there with the kids too, son. But anyway, and we had tubs and
Well-
ironing boards on top of the car. We looked like a bunch of gypsies, I tell you. That was, gypsies couldn't have been any worse.
well,
That's how we went back to Dallas.
I never would. We'd go about 100 miles. We'd have to stop work on that Studebaker, and we'd get it going again. We'd go another few hundred miles and have to stop again. And we'd been traveling for 2 days and nights trying to get to Dallas in that little old car with all the youngsters. And we finally stopped at this restaurant in Wascom, Texas, and went in there and to get a cup of coffee. And there was this waitress waiting on us. She come to bring our coffee. She said, "Where y'all headed?" I said, "Well, we're trying to get to Dallas, Texas, but we've been 3 days trying to get there." And of course, we told her all about the trip and everything, the car breaking down, all that stuff. She said, "I'm gonna give you something that will keep you awake." We was about to go to sleep while we driving because we've been up for a long time. So she had one of these little Benny tablets, Benziger, and she cut that thing in half, and she gave Tom Tree half of it, and she gave me half of it. And I took that thing, and we sat there and drank our coffee, and I said, "You feel any different?" He said, "No, I don't feel any different." So I told the lady when she come back over, I said, "I'm still as asleep as I was." She said, "Well, wait a minute till you get out and hit the night air." This was about, it must have been 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. Man, we stepped out that door, my eyes said, "Beep," like that. Tom Drake did the same thing. And then we drove out on to Dallas and didn't have any more trouble out of the car at that time. So we got into Dallas and to Maggie and Bob's, and hell, I didn't sleep after that. For a couple of days, that thing kept me just a half attack. Lord have mercy.
Well, I know that was the tiredest I ever been
I was
in
so
my entire
tired
life. Cause
that I thought I could sleep. But I get in the bed and I couldn't go to sleep.
But I sat up the whole way. I didn't get to lay down or hardly. We did stretch our legs every once in a while, but I didn't get to lay down or rest that whole trip. And I've never been so tired in all my life.
It was
was.
horrible. So
Okay.
we went back to Dallas and we got out and started riding around looking for a place to rent. And back then they had apartments that people just didn't put ads in the paper. They put a sign up in the yard, apartment for rent, something like that. And you could pay by the week, because nobody that was working with their hands or anything like that didn't have income coming in all month. So anyway, we drove by Berry Avenue, and there was a sign that stuck in the yard. It looked like a nice house and a nice place to rent. And we stopped, and Miss Birmingham come to the door. And we was asking her about the apartment and everything, and
She
She
showed us
says
the
that just the
apartment.
two of us, and I said, no, we have a son. That's a
Baby.
baby. I said, he's about 2 years old now, something like that. And she said, well, I normally don't rent to people that has children. And I said, well, lady, you keep this apartment open for me. We really like the apartment. Let me go down here and I'm gonna drown this young and I'm gonna come back and rent this apartment. She said,
No.
oh, don't do that.
That was not Miss Birmingham. That was another woman that said that. But Miss Birmingham never said that. She
But
wasn't.
maybe she did.
She was a big Christian, sweet
Yeah.
person.
She
but she,
turned out to be the best.
Now what it was is she showed us the apartment and we both liked it real well. But she asked us a lot of questions and I when we got in the car, I told Buddy, I said, Buddy, she's too nosy. I don't think I want to live. I don't think I'd like to live there because she's just too nosy. But then we decided to go ahead and rent the apartment from her, and she rented it to us. That other, what Buddy was saying, happened, with somebody else. It wasn't Miss Birmingham. Wasn't her. She
But
was
that
a
is
sweet
embarrassed
Christian
the old
person.
gal so bad when I told her I was gonna take this young and drown it and come back and rent that apartment.
Well, that's when Glenda and
She
Kim
liked
were,
it.
Glenda and Kim were babies, and you did that.
Yeah, I mean,
It wasn't.
that was that.
Glenda,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah,
Miss
I think
Birmingham
it
was too sweet a person to do it. But anyway, to make that long story short, when you was about 2 years old, she started babysitting you, and she babysat you until you were 4 years old. And during that time,
And that was when you was working at this department store and
the
stamp store.
and Tatches downtown Dallas. And that's the time that you took the whole swing set
No,
apart.
that was the time. That
and-
was the first go around. You went to work at Tatches at the time. The second go around, she went to work at the stamp store because Maggie was working there, and Maggie got her the job.
Jan Pitts.
Yeah,
got the
Jan
job.
Pitts was there. Well,
And
Maggie
then
was
Maggie
working there
come
too.
to work later on, even after I went to work there. She came to work. She was selling shoes at a shoe store before that. Maggie was.
Yeah.
But anyway, Miss Birmingham, I thought she was gonna be nosy and a busybody, but she turned out to be the sweetest friend I've ever had, the sweetest Christian friend, lady that I've ever known. And she was a rock in my life, and she took care of Glenn like she was his own child for a couple of years.
Even after we moved back to
Hattiesburg,
Hattiesburg,
we
to stay,
still
she
rode.
come back 2 times. She come to Hattiesburg 2 times to see
see
us
us.
from Dallas,
And
Texas.
we went once to see her.
So,
That's all we could
That
do.
was the kind of person that she was. And she
Huh.
But
just-
she turned out to be
Fine.
family more so than a friend or anything,
Okay, so, y'all were there to Dallas until y'all left to come back.
yeah.
In '68, we came
We
back.
were there. No.
Came back to Hattiesburg from Jackson in 19.
I know, but there are a lot of places in between.
Yeah.
What I want to talk about is, did you ever think of the name of the other child? We talked about Sugar and Bubba, and
Yeah, Kim.
Kim, Sugar, and
Bubba
Bubba.
Sugar and Kim.
Yeah.
And one or all of them was Miss Birmingham's grandkid.
They were grandkids.
Well, Kim wasn't.
Kim wasn't, but Sugar and Bubba
Bubba and
were.
Sugar were. Yeah,
Okay, and they were my playmates.
playmates. Right.
That picture, I guess, doesn't exist anymore. The 4 of us together.
I think I have it somewhere. I used to have it in my picture album somewhere. Whoa.
Well, I,
It's 4 little kids in a row.
yeah, I'll look some more, but I haven't seen it. I
Well,
don't
it could
think.
be in one of them others.
I think I've still got it in one of them.